Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you again, and welcome to the panel, Blak Imprints. We've got an hour with each other, so let's get going. I'm Sandra Phillips, I'm the moderator. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples, and with their custodianship, we are occupying unceded lands and able at the same time to enjoy each other's companionship and draw strength from their country, essentially uninvited. So thank you for joining us today. Now, the Black and Bright Festival team have done such great work in designing this program. This panel is described as writers discuss the importance of First Nations imprints in publishing. What else is needed in the publishing ecology? So small change, big impact. An additional person on the panel is Marie, who was on the previous panel as well. So you get a double dose of Marie today. And I'll quickly roll through bios because I do think that's important. Rachel Binsala, to my far right, is descended from the Niminbur and Yaru peoples of the Kimberley region of WA. Rachel is passionate about Indigenous people telling their stories, and Rachel started her career in publishing at Mugabulla Books in the 1990s. In 2014, Rachel became Mugabulla's publisher, and in 2018, she wrote her first book, Alfred's War, a poignant, and you might feel that in later. That's fantastic. And to Rachel's left, we have Yasmin Smith, who is an editor, writer and poet of South Sea Islander, Kabi Kabi and Northern Cheyenne and English heritage. Beginning her publishing career at the National Black and White Indigenous Writing and Editing Project, Yasmin has worked across literary fiction, non-fiction, children's books and poetry, with a focus on supporting First Nations creatives and their stories. And to Yasmin's left, of course, we have Marie Elena Ellis, who's an Arrernte Warlpiri woman from, can you help me with the pronunciation of your community name, Marie? Amungana. Thank you. Community 11 Ks southeast of Mabwantwa, Alice Springs. Marie is a cultural advisor, educator, multilinguist and interpreter and poet and comedian. Marie was selected to be on the First Nations Advisory Board for Pearson Publishing, one of the largest publishers of education resources in Australia. Marie is also a script writer and a writer of short stories. So to Marie's left is Marie's colleague and collaborator too, Tisha Carter. Tisha is an... Can you use microphone? Use microphone for you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My country I come from, my tribe is Majara.
Thank you. From
Tea Tree,
okay.
Alice Springs.
Beautiful, thank you. Tisha has worked tirelessly for her local community for over a decade across many roles, including with this healing centre. That name?
Yeah, I used to work for Akilira. It's the healing centre in Alice Springs. I worked amongst traditional healers, and also we did bush medicine and community work.
That's wonderful. What a fantastic panel we have this afternoon. And we've agreed I'll start with putting some questions or comments to Marie and Tisha, because running Water Community Press is a big part of why you're here and what you're representing today on the panel about publishing, and perhaps too how different mobs do publishing differently. So Marie and Tisha, can you share with the audience about running Water Community Press and how it started and how you do the work there?
Like from what I know, it was first Tolitis Press, and then it changed over to Running Water Community Press. And like about 6 years ago, we were invited to do a workshop, and the workshop was called Arundel Women's Talk, and what came out of it was a poetry book. Now, this poetry book consisted of about 11, 12 women. Yeah. And a few of the elders had died. So what we did, we dedicated it to them. A lot of the ladies couldn't even write. They didn't do poetry in their life. Some did. And it inspired us. We had two workshops. And out came this book. Now, we have sold, we're in 150 bookshops around Australia. We've been recognised as well in the world. And what else? Yeah, so, but Running Waters, a lot of us did voluntary work for a very long time. And now we're getting the funding to help us along this big journey. And like we want to make not only people that can hear and see. Our next step is to get this book in Braille, and also for the audio, so that hearing impairment people as well can enjoy this book. There's two actually, a children's book and this one. But this this work that we want to do is to make other people privileged, like, 'cause you don't hear the stories from Braille people, from hearing impairment people, you know. That was a wonderful book. Like now we're getting feedback, people saying, oh, gee, that's funny, your book. There's some good and there's some, you know, hard stories, life stories. But this is women in our world back home that struggle with their everyday life. To Marie now.
Forgive my sister here, she's nervous. This one here next to me. It's her first time on stage here. Rizzagan Nganje here has been... you would be clapping louder next year when I publish mine. Okay. Running Water Community Press, we have us women on the board of directors as well. We are on the board. And for us, we're a different language group. We're Arundel, Walbury, Majara, Kaidich, women all working together, and Majara. And we work together. And for us, because of our different language that we speak, but we see we all connected in that family. So the Alberta Ranger law, Alberta Ranger is the relationship law. So even though we're from different direction, different country and different language, we're still family. And that's what's important about knowing who you are and your language. And the Alberta Ranger law is, it connects us from one dot to another. So it's like we only marry our second cousin, not our first. We're not hillbillies. We live like plain. All right? DNA is important. But nowadays, everybody muck and run with DNA. Like Humpty Dumpty. I shouldn't start that. Let it go. But I just wanted to hear that. Running Water Community Press is us language group mob got together, us strong women getting together and building this. We have a lot of stories to tell because we didn't have that privilege and right to write our story, to share our story, our poetry, because we was forbidden, we was limited to write stories about ourselves, the truth-telling stories about our people, our family, our language, our culture, what happened to us when the settlers come there, stole our land, took every bit of our land, because they didn't understand, the colonizer did not understand the Berneringel law of that land. That's why I hate talking about politicians and politics. I avoid that. But for us, this is our chance, our opportunity, a strong group of powerful, educated women getting together and, putting pen to the paper to tell our story, that we can publish our story and tell them the way we want to tell them, not some, bookstores and white fella writing about, asthma belonging in this country. That word, dreamtime, you must know that word? What is the definition of dreamtime? Tell me. Dreamtime, that's in probably a courteous word. Right? It's in English. Dreamtime is you have a certain dream on a certain time, isn't it? You might have a scary dream, happy dream, all that. That's what I interpret what dreamtime is. I don't know what's happening with other people, but we don't use that. It's childish. It's degrading. We use a jogurba, a creation time. It's okay for others to believe and embrace other cultures with their mythical beings, and they make movies out of it, and everybody's like in awe, and they believe that. Am I right? You might believe in the, Greek goddess and whatnot, but you might don't want to believe in ours. Because our people have been so much degraded and lies upon lies been told about our people. Our Aljara no na kun anduri gawal pala pala. Proper rubbish us. And I want to share from Relagan Anganja, just a poem from Hakula Mom, Teresa Alice. And this is a poem that really inspires me. It, all in a nutshell, describe us. Sorry, just gonna get my glasses. It's about who we are. It's about time we got to stand up on our 2 feet and speak. Not scared anymore. Can you help me with that? Thank you. That's it. That's not the. This one called Listen. I love the sound of the ancient world. I like to listen to the deep sound of the old chanting songs. It connects me back to the timeless land, the land that only the Spirit walks. It teaches me to listen with my heart. My heart opens and releases my spirit. Deep into the land, it sings and dances as it goes deep into the land. The knowledge fills my heart, songs of the land. The songs make me dance with the wind. Teresa Ellis is the author of that poem. So for us at Running Water Community Press, we work extra hard. You know, we dedicate ourselves because we want to tell that story. And we want to be able to share it and showcase what we can and cannot do. We want to show everyone we are as much as educated as anybody else. But we're educated in both worlds, or the third world, you know. We're educated in all that. We're not, that's how the white fellas describe us. Well, them are drunken one, you know, they like drinking grog. Them have got no job, they hang around and Centrelink. Or they do this and they do that. When I come to city and everywhere else, I see the same. We're not different. We're one race, we're human race. I'm sick of that judgmental thing going on. I might sound a little bit angry because I'm a bit tired now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marie. And you may hear a little more about Running Water Community Press throughout the rest of the panel too. It's an amazing cooperative venture, and the board members, as you've heard, are from country and also are poets and authors themselves, and so they do everything. So thank you, Tisha and Marie. And next we have Yasmin. So Yasmin is also a writer and a publisher. So I'm interested to hear you share with the audience, Yasmin, a little about yourself as a writer, and then to speak about your publishing and the work that you're doing.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you, and thank you for sharing as well. I feel very honoured to be here and share stage with Anitish and Maria and Rachel. Yeah, like I think it's been a bit of a journey for myself in publishing and how I kind of moved into this space. And I don't know, I feel encouraged being on a stage like this because it makes me appreciate what came before me. And it gives me hope for what might come next in publishing and in First Nations storytelling and in literature itself, and in truth-telling for this country too. So, you know, hearing just how grassroots something like Running Waters has come from and been birthed from, I think the one thing that the one word that continues to stir in me is that connection. And I just think about my own story and my own way into publishing was all about connection with First Nations people and with mob too. I would never have kind of ended up at a trade publisher like the University of Queensland Press if it wasn't for the connections that I had made with mob. And I think about the people that came before me and the stories that came before me that helped me connect with what I really wanted to do in terms of career or life, you know. And I think about when I was like, you know, much younger, I was a reader, but I never read stories about me. I never read stories about people that looked like me on the page or had a voice like me on the page. And so I remember being given a book called Swallow the Air by Tara June Winch when I was much younger, and Tara, she'd won the David Unayapon Award many years ago, and she'd written that book, and I remember like reading it and just hearing her voice on the page, and just like there was something in her words that and the language that she used that just resonated with me as a reader, and also just as a First Nations person, as someone who loved story and who carries story in my body as well, you know. So I guess, yeah, like that was like a moment where I was like, oh, I really want to write, or I really want to work with story in some way. And I think it's about trusting the connections that come along. You know, through that, I started reading more First Nations writers And I was also connected with Ellen Van Nieuwen in my early 20s, just through, we both went to the same university together. So I guess my story was like quite traditional in that I went to uni and learnt more about storytelling in that world. But then I also just made connections with mob that were really significant then for me to move into publishing, into the publishing world. And then I ended up at UQP some years later, just because I had met so many people along the way. Ellen was actually my link to a program called Black and Write, which is a first of its kind. It's an editing and writing program for First Nations people. And I went and did like a 2-year internship there. And that really taught me a lot about how to connect with First Nations writers and to listen and to be able to deal with story in that, in that way of honouring the voice and the storyteller, and being able to understand the publishing world a little bit better as well, So yeah, it's kind of been an interesting journey, I guess. But I guess trusting those connections and honouring the people that come before you, has been a significant part of who I am today as a writer and an editor. Yeah.
That's wonderful, Yasmin. And with your writing, what do you focus on?
I do a lot of poetry. I think that's kind of my space that I'm most comfortable in. And yeah, I really appreciate kind of working in that form because it feels the most natural to me, and it feels that's how I can tell story the best. I find long form, like writing novels or in fiction, quite overwhelming. But there's something really beautiful in poetry that I've kind of connected with.
That's really interesting, and it reminds me of what Janine Lean said up here before about her poetry being non-fiction poetry. I thought that was a moment too to think about the way in which the form is harnessed for particular reason or purpose. And hearing you speak, Yasmin, about mob connections leading you into publishing, I think it is about what's come before you, and 30 or so years precedes that actively in the Australian publishing industry. She won't like me saying her name here, but when I went to UQP to work in 1995 after having worked with Rachel at Mugabulla, I kept getting called Jackie because Jackie Kachona had worked at UQP before I did, and Jackie Kachona before UQP had worked at Aboriginal Studies Press in IATSIS. Where she worked alongside Dr. Charmaine Papertalk Green, who's also here. So yeah, we've got some legion people here who've made the present possible. So I don't want to cast us in the past, Rachel, because we're still very present. But can you share with the mob here about, the importance of Blak publishing, Blak Imprints, or however you want to talk about it?
Where do I start? I was going to go on a rant. It'll be, like a stream of consciousness. Blak imprints are important because Blak imprints represent voice. Voice is important for mob because mob don't have voice. Mob has never had a platform in over 200 years in Australia. Once you get into publishing, when you surpass being black or coloured or anything, it is a class system. Once you publish something, you are still up against it in terms of distribution and in terms of where any title sits on a shelf. These are all unsafe spaces. Once a book gets into a bookseller, at a bookshop, more often than not, especially with black books, no one knows where to put them on the shelf. So in the 30, like, I've also been a bookseller, so the whole system from the minute you write something down, even if you cannot write, is stacked against black storytellers and black stories. So the fact that there is now a press in Central Australia, I think, is probably one of the best things that I've heard in a long time, so congratulations. You know? Yeah. Because we have, oh God, I'm on a rant here. We need to redefine success in terms of black success. And the majority of Aboriginal people do not have access to the skills to write. So it's oral, visual. And when mob first learned to read, it is visual. You read family first, you read country second. And then when you go to school, you read language on a page. Do you know what I mean? And more often than not, the education system fails mob continuously. So mob have to be inventive in and around telling stories, which means you have to change the values of you have to change the value of what is written. In Australia, it's kind of like literary fiction is at the top of the list, and we all talk about literary fiction. You know, in terms of that, doesn't make any money, but it gets you kudos. You know, so when it comes time to reflect culture, country, and individuals and what we say, we have to totally redefine how we think about writing, because writing is the least important thing of publishing, especially for black mob. It is the last thing we think about. So any mob that come to us at Muggabulla, first thing we do is, you know, oh, I can't write, I can't do this. And it's like, well, excuse my French, I don't give a fuck. Do you know what I mean? Talk to me, because really the tradition of storytelling is so ancient that the printed form is so restrictive to language, but message, it's so restrictive to culture, it's so restrictive to community, it's so restrictive to connection, that it's such a bind, you know. So when we talk about book publishing, writing for mob is the least important place to start when we do some of this stuff. You know, song is a good place to start. Talking is a good place to start. Kid stories is a good place to start, because everything is so important and nothing is more important than the next, if you know what I mean. And we all talk about language, but what we're not talking about is the spiritual values that language brings, not only to the page, but to the people that are speaking it in community and culture. So, you know, and once again, language can be a tool for good or bad, you know, it depends on, you know, what's happening. And one of the things for me, especially at Muggabulla over the years, is that community mob would always come to us and say, oh look, we've just printed it out on the computer and we've just bound it together, but we want to publish it properly because, you know, we'll get taken seriously. And I've just said to them, stop what you're thinking. Just because we put it in book form doesn't make it more important. You are valuing the wrong thing. You know, I have found more depth and breadth in a classroom PDF bound together with sticky tape than I have in a national important book, you know, on a subject, because what's happening is that the book form needs to reflect the values of the community that it is in. So even though we work nationally, every community or mob that come to us, it's kind of like, what's important to your community? Let's build something around what's important to your community, because then I need to fit it into the national lens of what Guttiers or white people will think and what they will pick it up to buy it. Because fundamentally, you know, for Muggabulla and working at Muggabulla, it's kind of like, well, what genre does it sit in? Like, I'm not averse to lying because, you know, because the history of the country is just one big lie. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, you guys started it. I'm just using your tools. Do you know what I mean? And like I say, if it's done before in publishing, just steal it. It's okay, you know, because we can do that, you know. And oh yeah, and it does. It sells. So for publishing and imprint and all of that stuff, storytelling is so important, but writing about it is the least important act of publishing, if you know what I mean, you know. And it's about reflecting the values of the community that you are in, because what hasn't been done over 200 years is that mob is not reflected in anything. Do you know what I mean? So, and also having mob controlling what goes out is kind of like a rebellious act in itself, because it's so what's important to you and your community and you know the space that you take up in a publishing house is not what white Australia thinks. So if you go to a mainstream publishing house and they'll say to First Nations creator, oh look, we want you to write about this because this is important. And it's like, oh yeah, it's only important to you white people. There's so much more breadth and depth in the telling of stuff that doesn't involve education or being didactic about who we are and what we do. And it's kind of like some of the stuff we've published is like, you know what, it can be a nice story. You know, it can be just nice. It doesn't have to be about identity. It doesn't have to be about this. It can be just, I don't know, about a frog that, you know, like cowboy frog. It's just a frog that's a cowboy. Do you know what I mean? Written by a kid, you know, illustrated by a kid in language. And that's okay too, because it's a fucking great story. And also at Mugabala, one of the things for us is we do publish books by children, because by and large, it's kind of like the history of this country has stolen our children and our voice, and the way to get it back is through children and what children see. And I always think to myself that children, like, we just don't give them enough credit for what they like and what they want to see and what they want to do. So, you know, and it's about listening, because without it, excuse my French, this country's fucked. That's my rant.
Thank you for ranting, Rachel. That's fantastic. And I don't agree it was a rant. I think it comes from, 30 plus years of living locally and regionally, publishing, working with communities and storytellers, and also having to be that person in the middle that connects to what others have talked about, the national market, the global market, and the tensions inherent between all of those locations. So it's amazing that you've got this strength of voice, and, at first it feels a little bit heretical to say writing is the least important, but what you're actually saying is the story, the song, the culture, the people, the community and culture is the most important. So thanks for coming out and sharing it like that. That's just fantastic. Also, I hear through here the cultural authority part of publishing. So publishing is to make public, and a whole host of decisions are made in that process or journey towards making something public. And with decision making comes questions of who are making the decisions, and who are making the decisions relates to who has the authority. So before I roll on and go back to the panellists, I want you to reflect while I share something else on that question, that thing of cultural authority and how it gets played out through your publishing environments. So I'll just leave that with you while I fiddle with this text message, which is a voice message, because I thought we can't talk about publishing imprints without acknowledging the fact that Nakia Louie has an imprint called Joan. I believe Aviva might correct me here, with Alan and Unwin, possibly launched in 2020. So we're looking at a few years, 2020, 2021. And also Professor Anita Heiss has her own imprint, and we're all looking at each other and going, how do we say Anita's imprint name? So I texted her. And ever gracious, she replied and sent a voice message, so I'm going to try and play that so you hear the pronunciation from Anita rather than from me. And it completely surprised all of us because we don't know Wiradjuri.
Hello, lovely. Hope you're having a good time in Melbourne. The pronunciation is Bunji. Bunji. So DY makes the J sound in our alphabet, so it's Bunji. Thank you. Say hello to everybody for me. Bye.
So we can let Anita know. Maybe, can I figure out how to do a voice recording of everyone saying hi back? Hi back, so someone contributed. No, I'll let that be a failed tech in motion experiment, but I will let her know. So the DY making a J, which was fantastic to get that direct from Anita herself. And Eva, the educator, she broke it down in the parts for us, so she made it really easy. So in those instances, I have no doubt that Anita Heiss deploys significant cultural authority over the decisions that she makes, and that Simon & Schuster get to harness their not insignificant resources in supporting her vision and her authority, which is fantastic. Similarly, I imagine with Nakia's cultural authority and decisions. So I'm going to throw first to Marie and Tisha on this. Can you tell us more about how you mob make decisions at Running Water Community Press?
At Running Water Community Press, we all get together. Like we also on the we board of directors as well, and each and every one of us have that authority, and we encourage each other as well. I want to go back to the Blak Imprints. I think I must have forgotten about that one in the early conversation. But the Blak Imprint is like Running Water Community Press is the umbrella. So we are the publishing place, house. And say if they were to interpret their stories and stuff and publish under us, it'll still be Running Water Community Press imprint. That would be ours. Everything would become under us. It can be written and stories and poems and stuff in Arada, Majara, Yangonjara, Pidginjara, Lurija, Alyawara, you name it. But the imprint is belonging to Running Water Community Press. And we have the authority and the the permission and stuff because we are cultural women that went through ceremony. We know who we are, where we come from, what is our place in our tribal society, and we follow our law. And our authority that we get given, our professors, when we learn from the older ladies, that's high up. And we as grandmothers that carry that law, we also have that authority. Yep.
Thank you, Marie. Yasmin, you're in a mainstream trade publisher. Can you share with the mob the reflections on how you think cultural authority might be enacted?
Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, I mean, being at UQP has been really interesting because I think it's obviously a trade publisher and it's been connected with the university since its origins, but I'm sure there's been a lot of learning along the way. I can say, one of the attractions of working at UQP was because of their strong list to support and champion First Nations voices for decades alongside, Mugaballa, and we were kind of the only houses doing that for quite a while. So I think there's been a lot of learning and a lot of reciprocation of listening and consultation done over the years. I think in recent times UQP have really upheld and pushed the standards of the industry to make sure that cultural safety and cultural advocacy and cultural identity is protected and safe within that space of publishing, but also like that authors retain their cultural authority over their work and over their words. And I think, yeah, like UQP having set, making sure that, our acquisitions team and making sure that our board has that representations of First Nations voices and consultation as the key element of how we operate. So I think, yeah, there's a lot to take away from the model that UQP's been working at for other mainstream publishers. But I can honestly say that, we are a publishing house that does strive to ensure that cultural authority is given to those that, that have the ownership of their stories and have the ownership of their voices, and there is that mutual respect that's shared between publisher and author. Does that kind of answer?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Yasma. Excellent. And with Mugabulla, I know from having been there, cultural authority walks and talks the whole place. But there are kind of mechanisms for cultural authority at Mugabulla too, like the governing council or the governing committee. And can you speak a little bit on how Mugabulla ensures that authority stays residing with the storytellers and community, Rachel?
Mugabulla started off as just a really a community space as well, but Mugabulla also started off as something that came out of elders' stories being stolen, their copyright to those stories being stolen. And unbeknownst to me, when we were little and at school in Broome, I can remember in the classroom that the nuns had said, "We've got the most famous author coming and you're going to be drawing some images for the story that she wants, the book that she wants." So I can remember in our classroom it was about the porcupine, so I thought I did the greatest echidna in the world, mate. Oh, there was no way they weren't going to love it. And my cousin got chosen as for the illustration that she did. So she went away and then she did the illustrations for this storyteller, and then the storyteller just copied her illustrations and put it in her book with a traditional story from the traditional storyteller. And it's kind of like, unbeknownst to me at the time, or actually to any of the kids, that's what happened. So Mugabulla came out of stolen stories, stolen voice, stolen children, all of that stuff at a Calac festival, which is the Kimberley Aboriginal Law and Culture. So the old people who'd been through law had wanted a mechanism for voice, to retain their own voice, their own integrity in their own culture, because it's, the Kimberley is also a place where many different, mob are. And so Mugabulla was born out of that. And so, and like coming from Broome myself and having, having a mixed background for the history of Broome at the time, so voice has always been really important. And then when I joined Mugabulla, I didn't realise till years later that particular story, that those books are still in print, mind you, that are being sold, and the families of the storytellers have advocated for years to be recognised as the contributors, and of which, it's only been just a small portion of being recognised now. No royalties still, but anyway, that's another story. So Mugabulla grew out of that, and then I realised many, many years later that, oh my God, I was part of that story as well, Mugabulla. So that whole full circle moment. So I think the most important thing for cultural advocacy is remembering where you come from, remembering who you're speaking for, remembering the community that you're in, the people that make the community up, the disenfranchised within the community, you know, women, children, you know, for whatever reason, there's lots of trauma in community. Also remembering that majority of people for mob especially suffer from some form of PTSD, so the editorial process in itself is really confronting. So you have to make space for that. And so like slow cooked food, which is really good at nourishing your soul and your guts, you know, slow cooked publishing is really good at nourishing community and story and place. So the most important thing is like, oh God, I sound like the Black Yoda. You know, if there's one thing that the last few years have taught me is that, you know, like I say to myself, we're all unique, we're not fucking special. So let's bring it back to perspective. You know, be humble about where you're from, because, you know, there's other stories always ready to come to the front. And for me especially, like my ex was a plumber. And so for me, it's kind of like, you think your shit don't stink, but I'm telling you now, you know, it does. You know, so just keep it real, keep it humble, and always take it back to the storyteller, because really lived experience for mob informs everything. You know, so in the whole dark emu debate happened in and around Australia, and it was kind of like, oh, you know, there's none of these footnotes and all of this stuff, and people were just raging about this stuff that's not important. And it's kind of like, it's not an educational text, so like a bit of perspective. It's one person's opinion, and oh, he's lying about history. And I think to myself, well, isn't what Australia's history is for the last 200 years like one big cop-out and lie? So we're not doing anything that's different, you know, other than changing opinion. And like, let's keep perspective on where we come from and where we're going to, because yeah, it's voice is important, and connection to where you're from is really important as well, irrespective of whether you have grown up in the community that you're connected to. Do you know what I mean? Because there is space for everyone with their truth in their story.
Thank you, Rachel. That's fantastic. So we do have 10 minutes left. Marie, you want to? Yeah?
I would like to add to that I forgot to mention that, you know, talking about the authority and stuff, we go through the Albanian law, that relationship law. Our grandmothers are the head of us. So we follow the grandmother's law in, you know, having that authority as well. So, yeah, I forgot to mention the grandmother's law. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have a roaming mic. So we've got 9 minutes now, and I'd encourage any questions from the floor to these panellists, who you're all very lucky to have in the room with you today. So I'd take advantage of that. Anyone? Yeah, down the front. Thank you. Brother there on the end.
Late last year, I was in the audience at a writers' festival in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it was the entire panel was spoken by and moderated by young writers, as an act to give them the voice and the control of the direction of those conversations they wanted to be having. And one of the young women in that panel, as part of her dialogue, said, I've got a question for the publishing landscape in general. Why does a writer have to be published in order to be a writer? And that question blew my mind because, you know, I'm in the publishing industry and the writing industry. So I wanted to get the panel's thoughts on that question, yourself included, Sandra.
That's a great question. What's your first name? Bibi. Bibi? Yes. Excellent. Thank you so much for taking that opportunity. Now, White Fella Take, years ago, a publishing manager said to me, well, essentially, a writer is unpublished and an author is published. So that's kind of a white fella take. I like how Mob talk about story and storytelling, and that writing is really one form of that. And I think Rachel's been great today in talking about the community context, and also someone, I think it was Deb Dank earlier, spoke about, and Helen Milroy, about storytelling and story listening. You know, that can kind of bypass the market and the industry altogether, storytelling and story listening. So who wants to take that one up further? It's Bibi? Yes. Yeah, great question, provocation.
Good question, Bibi. I think that with the way the world is going at the moment, and we're kind of like in some ways doing a full circle moment, and it started with Shakespeare. And in those days, the written word was always spoken, and nobody could read in those days, so the only way that they could read was through plays and performance and pantomimes, which is why England has a huge history of arts and culture, because that was the only way to get message across. And over the years, what's happened is we've become really enamoured with the written form, and to the point now where I find it really interesting, you know, with TikTok and the visualisation of social media, even though that's quite in itself dangerous, but we've moved back to visual and oral in lots of ways. And so our children are learning a different way of being that doesn't necessarily include reading and writing. And, you know, so it's kind of like, oh, the full circle moment, but not, but yes, you know, because we might as well, like that whole thing. So at what stage do we value all the other forms of storytelling, of which writing is a small part of? But writing in and of itself, you know, so I'm just going to go on another political rant here. So writing in and of itself is the most underfunded form of arts in Australia in general, but yet it underpins everything about our society, because without a literate workforce, you don't have a workforce. So all the successive Liberal governments that have gotten rid of the arts, it's kind of like you cut off your nose to spite your face, because the strength is in your art forms and valuing all types of art forms. And so, like, it doesn't worry me what form it comes in and what value larger society gives it, because, you know, in the words of the great philosopher, have you ever watched Mythbusters in the old days? And you know, Adam Savage goes, you know, I reject your reality and I substitute my own. And that's how I work, because it's like, yeah, no, it's not working for me, we're just going to do it like this, because I'm informed by my creators. Do you know what I mean? So I learn from them. So it's not the publishing house saying to my creators, no, you should be privileged to publish with us. I always think it's a privilege for us to publish them. And then sometimes it would be really good if they listened, you know, because it's just like, oh my God, another thing to do. But it is a privilege for us to put front and centre voice. And voice can come in all forms. And, you know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be written, oral, you know, the body form of language as well, you know, the body form of, you know, literature and learning, which is more than just writing. you know, we're the sum of all our parts, and we forget that.
Thank you, Rachel. That's great. We do have time for one more question. No?
If
Anyone
there's
game?
No question. I'd love to.
Yasmin
add
wants
to that because
say.
as Rachel was speaking, it just reminded me of a picture book that I've been working on over the last couple of years with an elder from Hopevale, Auntie Wanda Gibson. She just we're just about to release her first picture book. Auntie Wanda's in her 70s, and she lives on the mission. And she was a printmaker, and she's an artist who had one of her designs with magpie goose. And through that, her story was picked up, and someone had heard of her incredible story about how growing up on the mission, she'd as a small child she'd receive these 3 dresses from the church each Christmas, and she would go on holiday, like it would evoke that time when she would go on holidays with her family. And so she connected with another author who then spoke to her about whether she would like to publish her story. And so this is kind of how her story kind of came into being. But through this process, we were able to go up and visit Auntie Wanda at Hopevale. And as Rachel was speaking, like I just remember the richness of her. Yeah, I just remember the just being able to get so much from spending that time with her, like just going up and spending time in community and talking to her and connecting with her and being in her house and being able to walk on country where she was from. Like we were able to go and visit the sandhills that she would walk, 2 days through with her family to go to the beach and celebrate this special time. And there was so much joy and richness in just sitting with her and hearing her words that I feel like you don't lose anything of that in her work and in her art and in her form of storytelling in what we've put together in her picture book. But I just think of the opportunities that you don't get to experience the same richness of story when it is just print and it is just on the page, and how, maybe in the future there would be more spaces that we can open up to experience story in that way. And how people can be more enriched by that experience, I guess.
Oh, that's beautiful, Yasmin, because I feel like I've walked through those sandhills now just by listening to your first-hand but second-hand experience of it. And I think that's what the written word on the page, which Janine Lean talked about, had a poem about the violence of paper, which is fascinating as well. It's only ever a version of a deeper human experience. That version suits a colonial text-based society, and it gets to people in that form. But coming back to its origins and being on country with the storytellers is where the real thing is. So that's something that you've left with us today. And Marie's just gone and got some fresh air. It is a little bit kind of cloistered in here. We are able now to wrap up. Does anyone want to say anything before we do sign off? Tisha, do you want to say anything more?
What I wanted to say, tomorrow we're going to be doing our audio screening, and it's going to be in the afternoon. And I have a very, very special announcement to make about running waters. So it would be nice for whoever's here, come to the screening.
And it's very big news and very exciting.
Yes.
So can we thank the panel this afternoon, please? Thank you, darling.
I'll just share one.
One more thing?
Can I just share one poem? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not from me, but it's someone that couldn't write. There were two ladies that are in the book, but this lady that wrote this poem, So I just want to share it. I just want to share it with you. If you could just hold the microphone. Yeah, and I'll just sing. This is just some of the stuff that, like, what people have wrote in this book. She'll probably say, "Why did you read that?" Wait first. My friend Scobie. Wait first. Just go back to the thing.
Oh, yeah. So Scope, one of those pages.
Yeah. Sorry for taking long, but it's just. This is just some. Yeah.
Do you want to find the poem?
My friend Scobie.
Oh. Can I have a look?
Yeah,
You might want to.
Yeah. But also, I'll just give you a bit of information about running waters. We also got. We're doing a project with Water Justice. Now, I don't know if you know about Maureen O'Keefe, but her country, there's a big basin there, and it's really, really old water. It's been there forever, and the government's trying to take it for farming. And I don't know if you've seen it on TV, but they're fighting. And what's happening next week when we leave here, we're going back to that place and to protest against the government. Now, the work we do a lot of projects, and it's about, like, we work with the arid zone, with buffalo grass, like for our sacred places and things like that. So we're not only like riding in that, we're trying to protect our countries, and through writing and telling stories, and it needs, like, truth-telling needs to be told for the future of all people. Doesn't matter for Indigenous. It does matter for Indigenous and non-Indigenous, because if they take our water away, we're all going to be affected, and it's very precious. All right.
Is that this one?
Yes.
Or is this Scoby?
Yes.
I'll hold that for you. Actually, I'm going to use this one.
Yep. A letter to Scobie. This is by Magdalene Marshall. Now, this lady, she can't write, so I'll just read it. Scobie, if you go away, I'll be lonely, with no one to be my friend. I miss you. You take me to the shops and ask me to come around for a cruise. in your car. We have a good time cruising around in your car. You're a good lady. You asked me to come out with you. You asked me, do you want to go and sell a painting? And after that, we're cruising around. After that, we go home late. You drop me home, then you go home, my best friend.
Oh, gorgeous. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the afternoon.